what the scariest Godzilla can be. By now you've likely heard the news that TOHO is producing a brand new Godzilla film set in post-World War II Japan, which will explore the tension and fear inflicted from the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's going to explore a heavy-hitting subject that could end up making it the darkest and most terrifying film in the franchise's history. But when is scary too scary? Throughout the years, the series has explored all kinds of subject matters and has sometimes approached horror territory. But at what point does it become uncharacteristic for the king of the monsters? Well, today we're going to explore how disturbing Godzilla can become whilst still being a Godzilla film. I'm Alistair, and welcome to DangerVille. I often see comments from fellow residents stating they'd love a truly disturbing and scary Godzilla film. Something with blood and guts and people on fire and all that good stuff you'd find in a horror film. But in reality, that's not what Godzilla's about, and you can make the King of the Monsters infinitely scarier without a drop of blood. The original Gojira was released in 1954, a mere 9 years after the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan. It acted as a representation of the horrors committed that day, and also served as a warning that the same mistake should not happen again. It's one of the more gut-wrenching films of its time, as Japan couldn't make films about the bombings, so the closest they could get was with a giant monster, which served as a walking metaphor for nuclear weapons. It explored something that was still relatively unknown at the time. There were Hollywood films that glorified the bombings of Hiroshima and treated it as something to be proud of. But Gojira presented something new, somehow closer to what was really happening, even more so than some American World War II films. It was a disturbing film, yet it wasn't overly brutal. It demonstrated the effects of the bomb in a digestible manner for Western audiences. But that was 68 years ago, and times have changed. How can we adapt the King of the Monsters to a current, more desensitized audience without completely losing what Godzilla truly is? Well, in my opinion, some of the best horror is built when there is the pressure of time. Knowing that your inevitable end is approaching and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It sends your fight or flight racing, and your survival mechanisms really kick in, but go into overdrive as you come to terms with your imminent doom. I believe we can really make Godzilla scary with time itself. J. Robert Oppenheimer was an American theoretical physicist responsible for the research and design of the atomic bomb. As he witnessed the first detonation of a nuclear weapon on July 16, 1945, a piece of Hindu scripture ran through his mind.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Words that have sent chills down the spines of listeners ever since. In Christopher Nolan's upcoming film Oppenheimer, based on the nuclear physicist, the trailer presents us an idea that the film will be all about time, something that is commonly found in Nolan films, with the trailer featuring a ticking clock counting down to the minute the bombs were dropped. It sets the stage for a tense film all about a horrific event where over 250,000 people were killed. It's this nail-biting element that would fit perfectly in Godzilla. The element of time was somewhat used in Shin Godzilla, since when he cooled down they gave an estimated time frame for when he might wake up again. But for the upcoming film, Godzilla could be treated like the bomb itself, an imminent, unavoidable disaster created by mankind's own arrogance. This is what would make a Godzilla film truly frightening, relating it to our real world and putting a big emphasis on time. And when the time runs out, something truly horrifying would occur. But how do we present this oncoming event as terrifying? Well, cosmic horror is often brought up when discussing giant monsters. Cosmic horror, also known as Lovecraftian horror, is a subgenre of horror fiction that emphasizes the unknowable and incomprehensible instead of simple gore or shock. The idea that human existence is insignificant compared to the vast universe. It could be argued that some Godzilla films fall into this category, as Godzilla is a creature of impossible scale, wreaking havoc amongst cities across the world. Making Godzilla feel more like an unknowable, unpredictable, and incomprehensible entity could be the key to making the King of the Monsters truly terrifying. It's not so much the death and destruction itself, but the countdown to its arrival, where everything we know about the natural world would be put to question. If the film was to combine that cosmic horror idea of Godzilla with the aspect of time counting down, it could leave us with a Godzilla film unlike anything seen before, where it doesn't necessarily have to show blood to be scary, but in of itself is a terrifying idea. Some scientists could know what it is and what it's capable of, and that it's headed in the direction of the city, and they have a certain amount of time to figure out a plan or evacuate the city. Japan had already suffered from the first 2 bombs a few years prior, and right now they're counting down to the third, in the form of Gojira, a monster birthed by radiation from the bombs themselves. Or perhaps the film could be split up into a variety of short films, all centered on one event where Godzilla makes landfall to the surprise of the Japanese civilians, and we get to know various characters throughout the story, all crossing paths with one another that experience the disaster from their own perspectives, with each short counting down to Godzilla's arrival. Think of it like Final Destination, but with Godzilla. You know these people may die, and you're right there with them in the chaos. This would bind Godzilla to the atomic bomb more than ever and make it reflect the imminent doom of the 1945 attacks in a way I think many people have never experienced before. This is how I believe TOHO's concept has the potential to be the scariest Godzilla film of all, by bringing us back to ground zero, where many of the Japanese citizens were still grieving from the attacks. The idea of another attack even more powerful than both atomic bombs would strike fear into the hearts of anyone. Of course, TOHO could go in one of many different directions, but for them to go back to the heart of the tragedy that brought Godzilla to life in the first place, I have no doubt that the upcoming film, rumored to be titled Godzilla Zero, will be more gritty, realistic, and most notably, terrifying. And in a time where the threat of nuclear bombs is higher than it's been for decades, it's a very relevant concept that could remind the world that this is something we don't want to experience again. But what do you think? Would you be interested in a Godzilla film that focuses on time and the countdown to Godzilla's arrival, or would you be more interested in a monster brawl flick? Let us know in the comment section down below. Subscribe and stomp the notification button to become a resident of DangerVille today. And like this video if you're hyped for Godzilla Zero. I've been Alistair, and we'll see you residents in the next one.